So where are we today, John?
We're on the La Trobe University complex on the lake, right on the far side of the university, near the West Heidelberg Industrial Estate.
And have you fished here before, John?
Many, many years ago, I'm talking maybe 20 or even 30 years ago, we used this place as a match venue. In those days, we caught roach and carp and perch and all sorts out of here, but it's not been fished for many, many years. I came here probably 3 or 4 years ago and had some quite big carp on a pole and never even got them out. I was just undergunned for them. And one of our members has fished here in recent weeks and told me that they got some carp and some goldfish, and there were quite a few of them. So I've come here today really to see if I can catch a goldfish or two, so that this venue could be suitable for any of our members to come and not only catch carp, but hopefully catch a few fish like goldfish, so that they'd have a bit more of a session, catching a few more fish than just maybe the odd big carp. I think if somebody comes here and targets big carp, maybe casting over to the far side with a method feeder, they'd get them. I'm pretty sure they would. There's quite a big lake up here to the right where we used to fish. We used to peg that, and there's another area around the other side to my right where you can fish as well. But I've just walked through a walkway there and basically jumped in the first peg just for convenience today.
Why did the clubs stop fishing here, John?
Many, many years ago, the committee members of the club were based down the southern part of Melbourne towards Frankston area, that area, and a lot of the anglers were down that way, lived down that way, and as a consequence, during that period, I think Melbourne course anglers was really developed into just a match type match fishing, and had very little influence or interest in promoting course angling, whereas now Melbourne is much more interested in course angling plus matches, and as a consequence this was probably a bit too far, well, they considered too far to come. And also in the day it was the sort of place where you needed to have reasonable skills to get a reasonable bag of fish off of it, and some of those guys probably weren't catching that many fish when they came here, where they had some venues down that area where they lived where they could get better nets of fish. So that influenced the way that they thought about how to run competitions.
Yeah.
And this place just became, well, in their eyes, not suitable. The reason I'm looking today is to see if there is some suitability for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, venues, I mean, we've done a lot of work in the club to identify venues, but we haven't really, we've identified over 100, but we haven't qualified them. So this is the work that we need to do to qualify the venues. But it's all about access, you know, distance access, bank access, and the fish population, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And if you can get those three things right, then help our members to find venues that are close to them. And also, you know, it's a shout out now to ask members to share. I know anglers don't like sharing their favourite venues, but you know, to share a few of their venues with other people, so if they are passing through that area, they've got somewhere to fish. You know, I spend a bit of time in South Gippsland, and you know, there's not a lot in South Gippsland, but there's a few venues, and I intend to film down there as well, just to let people know So, you know, it's good work that you're doing, John.
Well, like you say, I mean, Richard's done a lot of work to identify over 100 venues, but really, I think it'd be a good idea, and I think we will do it, is to have a, you know, a top 20 where we can maybe pick the ones that are good. We already know quite a lot of them from past experience, so, but have those, but then identify the venue, identify the best methods, and identify the best baits. And if we present that in a couple of pages and a format on the website for all members to get freely, then that can only be a step in the right direction. Yeah. Be like any UK type club where they've got, unfortunately we can't have club venues because, you know, there's no lakes as such that we could rent, buy, and we're not a big enough club to maybe pay for something if there was. So we have to go on these places like here, which are open to everybody. But if we can document what they're like and what you can do to catch them and how you can catch them to make life easy, it can only be good for the membership.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a disadvantage that we can't lease waters just for us, but the big advantage is that pretty much everywhere that we fish is free.
Yeah.
It might not have it might not be a lot of pegs on some of these venues, but I mean, somewhere like this is perfect. I mean, this has got plenty of pegs. The access is easy. You might want to bring a barrow, I suppose, just if you want to go a couple of 100 metres around this path. But it's got good bank access. You can pole without bothering too many people. You know, there's plenty of these venues that we've identified.
Yeah.
It's a shame we've come here today on a high pressure day in blazing sunshine after a load of rain, because it's not the best conditions for
no, not at all,
for fishing.
Probably the worst.
How much bait have you poled in? Have you tipped in so far, John?
I put 2 lots of bait in before I started fishing, just through that little cad pot on the end of the pole, with probably half a dozen maggots and topped up with some ground bait. I'll do it again now. It's about time I did it, so I'll actually do it now. One of the things here, there is a bike path behind us, so what I'm doing is dropping the pole to one side, like so, and breaking down to the side of me, so that my pole's not on the path and out of the way.
Yeah, it's a good technique to learn, isn't it? So you're not bothering people on. We've already seen a few people come along here on bikes.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
I can tell you now, if you know, in the past, people have had poles out there and they've been walked on and they've been cycled over. So what I've done on this little cad pot is I've put a few homegrown maggots in it, and I've also put a ground bait. This is quite a famous ground bait in the UK called cats and dogs, and there's one of our friends up in Sydney who is actually a personal friend of Steve Ringer. I think a lot of our members would know the name Steve Ringer, but Mark is a mate of Steve Ringer's, and Mark used to work in a shop in Northampton where they made this cats and dogs, which was one of the first sort of ground baits that was used on carp venues in the very early days of commercials, when continental ground baits were not set up perfectly for those kind of fisheries. And all the lads in the area, Steve Ringer and all the other blokes, were actually using this cats and dogs ground bait. And Mark's actually worked in the shop where it was being sold, and he used to make it and formulate it for the shop. The shop's still in existence, And Mark contacted the owner, who is still making cats and dogs and selling it, and got the recipe. And Mark's now making it here in Australia, and he's given 1 or 2 bags to some people, myself being one, to test it. But he's having a lot of success in Sydney winning matches. Only yesterday he fished in the worst section of his local competition. He was in a really bad section. There's one particular section which is a section of death sort of thing, but he still had 14, I think it was either, I'm not sure whether they weigh in pounds or kilo, but he had 14, let's say, pounds, and all the other weights were around 4, 5 and 6. So it certainly worked yesterday, and he won a match the last time out using cats and dogs. And so that's what I'm using. I'm using cats and dogs as the ground bait, and I'm using just homegrown maggot and bread as hook baits.
How do we how do our members get hold of cats and dogs?
Well, big problem is the transport of it because of the weight. But Mark is actually going to make it, and he's given me 3 experimental bags of it. Well, more than 3 bags, but 3 types: a red one, a green one, and a natural one. I'm using the natural one today. I've had a lot of success so far using the green one. I've caught fish wherever I've used it. And Glenn Nichols has been using it with some success as well. So Mark's intention is to make a lot of bags up and get them down to Melbourne. But the easiest way would be if he was coming down here, driving down on business, because he does do that 2 or 3 times a year. He could stick it in his truck and bring it down. But at this moment, he's anticipating to make a lot up for when the Canberra Classic is going in November, which is only about 3 or 4 weeks away. And he was talking about making 60 or maybe 100 bags for Melbourne and swapping it over with one of the guys who goes up to Canberra, and for that person to bring it back for me. And then I'd have it in my garage in bulk and would sell it maybe 10 or 12, I'm not sure of the price, but it'll be about $10 or $12 for a kilo bag.
Okay, so if people want to put in advance orders, they should do that to info@melbournecourseanglers.com?
Yeah, they could do that, I suppose, yeah. Give me a ring. I'm sure most people have got my number. They could give me a ring. I've already, one of the guys, he saw me using it and said, can I get some? And he ordered 6 bags straight away.
Yeah, well, I'd like three bags of each as well, please, John, while we're on the subject. I've actually used, you gave me a bag, and I used the natural with some hemp and maggots in it. That was when we did that test at Laurie's Field.
Yes.
And
I know you had a great day's fishing.
I had a great day, so yeah, I trust it for sure.
One of the things I've noticed about it is I've made my own ground bait, and I've had like a roach mix and I have a carp mix. And one of the things I've noticed, if you use a continental ground bait, as in Sensors or Vandenide or something, when you feel it, it always feels soft and nice and silky. So it's I don't know whether you'd call it powdery or what, but it's certainly got a beautiful texture to it. But when you make ground bait out of breadcrumbs, it always feels a lot harsher in your hand. And I know for sure that those particles of breadcrumbs are going to absorb quite a lot of water. And it's a bit of a fine edge about how much water you put in and, you know, turning it into a bit of a stodge. What I can say about cats and dogs is it actually is soft and fluffy, just like European ground bait. I've got no idea what he puts in it, with the exception that I know that it's a fish-based product, because he's told me, and the smell of it is quite pungent and quite unique. I couldn't even tell anybody what the actual smell is. I couldn't identify it, but he mentioned to me the other day he does put some betaine in as well, which is a really good fish attractor. I don't know if it's betaine I can smell. I've got no idea what the smell is, but what I do know is that it actually mixes fabulous.
I would agree with you. I think the smell that we get off it is betaine.
Do you think so?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah. It's not overpoweringly fishy. I should get my wife to smell it because she's got a far better nose than my 40 years of smoking has destroyed my smell.
My wife, when she was alive, in her younger days, had quite a big nose, and I used to say to her, "Do you want me to pick it for you because I'm nearer to it than you are?"
Oh.
But that cost me dearly because she went to a plastic surgeon and had a nose job.
Oh my God. Yeah, I don't think these maggots are doing the trick, John, are they?
No. Well, today's an experimental twofold, isn't it? One is fishing, this venue, as I say. I mentioned to you earlier that I'm very much intent on trying to understand high and low pressure weather. I know that today is absolutely high weather, high pressure, and high pressure is the most unfavourable for fishing because the fish don't want to go down onto the bottom easily, and that's where we're fishing, on the bottom. And I know that there's a lot of influence over the way the fish behave. If you watch a load of the English videos, they're always talking about the pressure patterns in the UK, and it's something that I've never took any notice of, but I am looking at it now, and I'm absolutely intent on understanding it better. Be a good idea, to put a barometer on our website so that anybody who's intending to go fishing could easily just click on the barometer and we could have a fish predictor on it, something like that.
Something like that, yeah. Yeah. I'm actually playing with a little electronic development kit at the moment, and if you've got your phone, there's a barometer on your phone.
I've got a barometer on my phone.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what it actually says.
I just checked mine, it's 1012. It's actually not, or 1020, it's actually not ridiculously high.
But it's rising, isn't it?
But it's rising, yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, we had it absolutely super high last weekend. The guys who fished up at Mildura at the start of that Mildura week had really high pressure, but then it dropped and they had an absolute field day. The 200 kilos was caught by one guy, which is an absolutely ridiculous amount of fish. And then it dropped. All that bad weather that we've just had, we're talking here on Monday morning, and over this weekend it's been terrible weather. This lake is full of fresh, dirty, muddy water, which is another thing that doesn't help too much, but that was a low, but that's past us, and now we've got 25 today and 29 tomorrow. That's typical high again, isn't it?
Yeah.
Building as well. So it does have an effect.
I must say, this is the first time I've ever been to this venue, and I love this little canal section.
Yeah, it's good.
It's like you say, you could definitely chuck a method over on those reeds, for sure.
Well, I came here about 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, and I haven't been back since. But on that day, I think I landed one carp that was probably about 8 or 9 pounds, and I think I lost, from memory, it was either 3 or 4 others that were just about unstoppable. And I never saw any goldfish, but as I say, I did have some information from a guy who said that he had caught goldfish here. In all honesty, if there was any amount of goldfish here, I would have thought I would have had a bite by now. Because when you go on a venue where there's goldfish, there's generally a few of them. I've never been anywhere where you just see an odd one.
No.
You generally go and there's a load of them.
It was like when we went to that place down the road, that little shallow pond.
Yes.
And
yeah, it was one after another, wasn't it?
One after the other, yeah.
It was like a jacuzzi of goldfish.
Yeah.
And that place probably had never been fished before.
No. I mean, I put money on there being lots of fish in this venue. It's so big. And it's part of the same system where we know that there's plenty of fish. And it's not like the VFA are going to come here and empty the joint. So
no.
I'm sure I think it's just a bad day.
Well, to my right, there's a tree with a load of overhanging stuff right on the water's edge. And there was definitely fish sort of messing around down there this morning. There was ripples coming out from it, there were splashes. I thought that it was like a spawning session.
Yeah.
That's what I would have guessed. It looked like that to me.
I went with Stuart Monkton the other day to Candlebark Reserve, and I got there and the fish were just spawning all over the place. I didn't even bother setting up. Stuart never got a bite, so it is that time of year for sure. Although that's a lot smaller body of water than this, but I mean, this is a bigger surface area, so it should warm up, I guess, almost as quickly.
On that day where I fished further up here to my left, when I had those carp, but a bit further on where it opens up into the main lake. Have you actually seen that, Stuart?
I shall take a walk up there later.
Yeah. There was an island, and there must have been 30 carp on that island that day, just swimming around. You could see them as plain as anything.
Yeah.
And when you go up there, you will see that it's an area of quite well-worn bank that you would imagine that's where they're feeding ducks and stuff, where people go and feed ducks. And I'm guessing that's why the carp were there. But that was a few years ago, as I say.
I think maybe we should maybe have another social day, maybe down here, when the weather's a bit more favourable. And maybe make it a bit more of a training day than we did last time.
Yeah.
Just to help people.
Well, we're coming to the time of year where it should get much better fishing everywhere, aren't we?
Indeed, yeah.
I mean, the lakes and the rivers up round Kyneton, where we were last year quite a lot. The roach fishing up there in Colliban and Lauriston, and even in Malmesbury, if you want to give that a go. I know Malmesbury's got loads of roach and carp, and then the Campaspe River is full of tench.
Yeah, I'd love to give Malmesbury a go. There's a whole so many venues up in that Goldfields area that we need to fish. I think, we were talking earlier about venues and distances to be travelled, and I get it. People don't want to. They don't like having to drive miles and miles, But unfortunately, particularly if you're after roach and tench, you really have to.
Yes.
And I think that people are missing out if they don't make that effort, to go that extra. Like I'm happy to drive a couple of hours there and a couple of hours back. And if you're not prepared to do that, well, then you're kind of stuck with, particularly down south Melbourne, you are stuck with, pretty much the same waters all the time.
Yeah.
I would encourage all of our members to, to make the effort to go to some of these venues that we've identified, because they're so good.
Well, at the moment, we've got a membership of around, I think it's 60, isn't it now?
Yeah, I think it's 60. It's showing 59, but I think that's my error. I think I might not have tagged one of the members correctly.
Yeah. But, out of the 60 members that we've got, only maybe 20 of them are active match fishermen.
Yeah.
And one of the big issues with the venues is that if you're match fishing, years ago, when I went match fishing, I took a wicker bag, a little plastic bag maybe with a bit of bait in it, and a a rod in its own rod bag and a reel, or maybe 2 rods and 2 reels, but certainly it was lightweight. And today I'm sitting on what I think is my lightweight system, and this is far more extensive than anything I had when I was younger. But I've also got a full sort of match kit where if you do take that fishing, it's much more convenient if you can get very close to where you're going to fish because of the weight of it.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that's always the thing, isn't it? You know, like people complain, you know, there's been sort of errors. I don't want to point fingers at anybody, but there's been minor errors made at places like Hume where, I mean, I suffered with it. Like getting to the peg was hard enough. Getting out of the peg up a massive sandbank was, you know, after
5 or 6 hours
fishing
treacherous.
and in the heat, I was cooked, you know. And it's unless I think it's difficult here because there's so many wild waters. Whereas in England, you know, you watch all those videos of matches and people are pretty much driving behind their peg.
Oh yeah, that influences everybody's idea. The thing is though, in the past, Melbourne course anglers had Treehaven as a venue that was cultured and made to be as good as you'd ever want, because we could drive behind the pegs and everything. And that was in the south, down towards Frankston that way. And then we had another venue, which we named it as Willows, that was up near Wood End. My personal view was that Willows was far better than anywhere else, mainly because it had a much more diverse amount of fish, and it never had any carp in it. It had lots of big goldfish. It had huge tension perch. I mean, I've had my biggest ever perch out of there that was close to 4 pounds. But in both cases, they were on private land, and in both cases, that land was sold by the owners that gave us permission to use it. And in both cases, the new owners said, no, we don't want you on it. So we'd built those into beautiful fisheries that you could park and fish easily and conveniently. Willows, we'd even put 20 platforms in. It was fabulous, but we lost it.
Yeah, that's the danger, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it is a big danger to cultivate a lake. I mean, the guys on both lakes spent hours and hours and hours doing work on them, and also well, you'll have to edit that out then. But the point is, they were fabulous, and that's why we're doing things like this. Because we can't rely on those venues, and because it's easy enough to lose them, is it really worth the time and effort to invest in another one if we could find one even? I mean, Richard's found one up in Warrandyte where, again, the guy's given us permission. You can do what you want with it. And that is a beautiful lake. Trouble is, you can't park around it, can you?
No, and it's down a pretty steep hill, and a lot of our members are...
Yeah, they'd be reluctant to go there. And on top of that, we've done the same as what we're doing here today, and we've not really found any head of fish in there, have we?
No. Yeah, it's...
And then the one that we had the other week, a couple of weeks, well, what was it, a week ago, where we fished at
Laurie's Field.
Laurie's Field. That's full of fish, isn't it?
Full of fish, yeah, absolutely full. I mean, you know, if you wanted to run a friendly match there, you know, I think most people would catch if you use the right methods. You know, it doesn't seem to be. It didn't appear peggy anyway, did it?
No, not at all. I think you'd catch it. I mean, there's 2 lakes at that Laurie's Field. One of them is quite a big lake, and, you know, I think you could easily have 20, well, let's say 15 fishing spots on it, and everybody would have a reasonable amount of room. And then there's a bottom lake, and there's sort of a burr going between the 2 of them, a piece of land. And there's another lake on the other side. I actually fished in that one last weekend, and I had as many fish in there as I've had in the big lake. So, and there's 5 fishing spots in that smaller lake. So with the 5 in the small and the 15 in the big, that would be very suitable to fish a match up to 20 people.
Yeah.
And I think everybody would catch fish, and I think the winning weight could easily get to £40 easily, I would have thought.
Well, I mean, you had more than I did, and I had a dozen fish. Let's say they're averaging 1.5 kilo each.
Yeah, we had one really big one.
And then I had
didn't we?
one really big one at the end. So, 11, about 16 kilo plus that big one, about 3. So say 19, 20 kilos. So 40 pound for sure.
Yeah.
And that was in 2.5, 3 hours.
Yeah. I mean, well, like the old saying, it probably would drop off if there's more anglers on it. But there was enough anglers round you in the area you were to maybe influence what you were catching.
Yeah. Yeah.